also, one thing that I highly recommend for anyone aspiring wrestling content creators is to not have to like treat every show you watch like it's part of your job. Like, because I
Yeah.
was watching like Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, and I had to have takes for all of them. And I tell you what, that was exhausting.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Flourish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by a legend in the wrestling content creation game. I'm joined by the one and only Brian Zane from Wrestling with Regret. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's been a while. You said I think you said off air it's been 3 years since our last chat, and so much has changed in that time. It's crazy.
Something like that, because I just celebrated as we record this. This week was 3 years of the podcast. And I know you were one of the very first guests, so it's got to be around that time.
Well, here we are. Look at us. Look how far we've come.
I'm really excited to have you back on. I'm not gonna lie. But before we get into any of your work of wrestling with regret, Brian, and independent wrestling, Ring of Honor, etc., where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
When did I first discover wrestling?
Yeah.
Uh, well, I mean, I first saw it, I would stumble upon it when I was a kid. I remember flipping through the channels and like me as a little kid, not really having a concept of time. I would just kind
Mm.
of flip until I saw something that caught my interest, like most kids do. And I forget what it was specifically, but I do remember seeing like wrestling and being like really fascinated by it. I think some of my earliest memories of like what I saw when I was flipping the channels was all like WCW stuff. Because I remember like seeing Vader beat somebody up once. I remember that might have been 96. That might have been WWF, but I remember seeing like they teased the unmasking of the Black Scorpion and like it was
Mm.
a ruse. So I seem to remember that. I didn't know what that was at the time until, later when I was a grown up, but it was yeah, and I didn't really my parents always shot it down and didn't want me to watch it. And so then when I started watching like in middle school, that's like how I really got into it because it was the
Mm.
late 90s. It was the Monday Night War. And I was, the N64 games that THQ and AKI were making were what got me into wrestling initially before I really started watching the TV product. And so that's kind of how I credit my fandom is from, World Tour. It's kind of like how I got into football. I didn't really start liking American football until I played Madden 2004. And so that's kind of how I fell into wrestling too. It was video games that, made me a fan.
Who was your go-to character when you play World Tour?
Um, it would either be like Ultimo Dragon or the Black Ninja, which is like one of the fictional characters, like based off somebody else. Although in my more recent years, my guy is like Scott Norton, because you can like knock a guy out in like 45 seconds if you're lucky. You just keep power bombing him until
Yeah,
he goes
yeah, yeah.
down. So he's kind of a cheat code in a way, but that's kind of the guy I play with. I play as now if I ever go back to it. But yeah, back in the day, it was definitely Black Ninja because I liked his springboards, his cartwheels, his little leg lock where he would like bend the leg at like a 90-degree angle. Like, yeah, that was rad.
So you talked about discovering wrestling and other sports like American football through video games. So were you a big gamer as a kid then?
I mean, I loved playing video games, but I don't really know if I would call myself a gamer because like my library is always really small and I'll just play
Mm.
the hell out of a game. I'm still playing the same games that I played when I was like in middle school and high school. But some of my go-to games are like the N64 wrestling games, GTA, Vice City, and San Andreas. I'll
Oh,
bop back
what
between
game?
those two a lot. I will play Final Fantasy X. I just got done playing through that again. Um, I just find myself, my tastes and my enjoyment has crystallized to the point where I can't like almost can't absorb new games anymore. I'm playing Cyberpunk right now, but like that's like the one current game I'm playing. But like I don't know. I mean, I love video games. Like if it was an option of like, what to do with my spare time. If it wasn't wrestling, it was usually that. But like, I didn't, I don't consider myself a gamer because I don't play the first person shooters. I'm not really good at those, like the online ones. I'm not an
Mm.
online gamer at all. Like racing games, fighting games, like none of those appeal to me. So it's like, I don't know. I play the CPU. It's a battle with me and the computer, and that's kind of what I want to keep it at.
So you talked about there it being a battle with you and the computer, and you also talked about discovering when you discovered wrestling there. So when you did, was it sort of the thing that you talked about also your parents being like, no, 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 you're not allowed, not allowed. That might not be the right word,
Oh,
but you know what
well,
I mean.
yeah, well, video games, yeah. Um, I can vividly recall renting Primal Fear for the Super Nintendo
Oh yeah.
as a kid and knowing that my dad was going to get upset about it. But Primal Fear or Primal Rage or Primal Fear, it's one of those ones. But that had an option to turn off the blood. And so I did that. And even I tried to explain that to my dad at the time. He would have none of it. So I think that was probably a part as to why my gaming knowledge is pretty minimal because I was kind of
Mm.
raised in a pseudo like tight household in terms of like what kind of stuff we're watching and consuming. So I played a lot of Mario games. I played a lot of, platformers and stuff in my youth. And then yeah, so yeah, video games were fine. My folks encouraged that to an extent, but they definitely like my dad especially would give me like a side eye if there was something, a
Mm.
whiff of, inappropriateness.
You talked about getting the side eye there. And so, what is the biggest side eye you ever got when you started watching wrestling, like in a full time capacity? Do you remember the biggest
Like
side eye
from my
you ever?
parents,
Yeah, yeah.
literally, I'm 90% sure I remember my dad walking in during the scene where Mark Henry gets felt up by Sammy, the
Mm,
crossdresser. But
mm.
that's the worst possible scene for your parents to walk in on. I also remember some show like I think it must have been 99 or 2000. Triple H was making his entrance. Yeah, no, it was definitely 99 because Triple H and China were still an item, and they
Mm.
made their entrance and you see them, they're like lit from underneath with like the blue and the purple and the green lighting, and my dad sees that shot. Now Triple H, his physique, his pecs are very round, and so my dad he had this line. He just sees China and Triple H, and he goes, "Women with huge breasts, men with huge breasts."
I love that.
So I've always kind of, when I see Triple H now, I always kind of think of that line from my dad.
That's
But
brilliant.
yeah. So that I've made it a point. I made it a point shortly after that to stop watching wrestling around my parents for a long time after that.
So, you obviously talked about there not watching wrestling around your parents. So, how would you consume it when you became a fan then?
I would watch. I mean, I would end up watching it. Eventually, got to the point where my parents couldn't really stop me.
Mm.
And I would watch it. I would watch the Raws. Um, Occasionally, I would pretend to have fallen asleep. And like we had a basement with a TV, and that's where I watched it. And I would occasionally pretend to have fallen asleep on the chair. When it's like getting close to 11 or whatever. And it's like I'm trying to watch the end of Raw, and then like my parents are coming down to see, go to bed.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I ended up consuming it. And then like I also would, record a lot of the shows and try and watch those back on VHS. But yeah, no, it wasn't like a dirty little secret, but it was definitely something that my parents kind of tut-tutted me for. And but eventually now that it's my career, they don't really say anything about it.
No,
So
I can understand that. So you talked about it being your career there. Before we get into the origins of your, actually, let's go to the origins of your channel first. I know that your first video was published on June 13th, and it was about Mohammed Hassan, if I've done my research correctly. Is that right?
Yep. 14 years ago last month. That's right. It was 14, 11 years ago
Yeah.
last month. That's right. Oh man, my mind is going. But yeah, it's been a while. It's crazy to think I just feels like yesterday I celebrated 10 years and now it's already 11 that I've
Hmm.
been doing this channel. And yeah, it's pretty wild. It definitely is taking me on a journey that I would never have expected. In my craziest fantasies of what I thought the channel could be, I didn't think it could, get to be this. So it's been pretty cool. I'm pretty fortunate, I feel.
So, what was you talk about there being fortunate and stuff. What was the initial idea for the channel? And if you could look back on that video now and maybe remake it as you've learned stuff, what would be your advice to, we'll talk about young Brian Zane in a bit, but younger
Hmm,
Brian Zane?
I don't know. I mean, excuse me. I think um I look back at my old stuff and I realize that there's so much more I could improve on or redo, but like that was all a product of what I had available at the time. Like I was such a cheap guy at the time. I was like, I'm gonna spend like 80 bucks on this cheapo camcorder and I'm gonna try and find this like ripped copy or a cracked copy of Final Cut Pro so I can edit. Like I had the knowledge of how to film and edit video because I went to school for it. At the time, I was working in local television
Mm.
and doing very similar tasks, but I just didn't have the money to like get my own equipment and stuff. Because here's a secret, folks: working in television is not as
Glamorous as they think it is.
not quite lucrative as you think it is, especially small market, TV news. But it was just one of those things where I basically did what I could to put out something that was passable and
Mm.
that I, felt proud of. And yeah, it was a process where I kept at it for a while until the point where I was like, well, I really feel like an upgrade now. So finally, I think it was maybe 2 years in where I finally bought like a better camera. It's the camera I actually use to this day, my
Oh,
Canon
wow.
T5i. So it's served me well for the last several years. And then I finally, went and invested in a light kit and instead of using an old work lamp, just bouncing it off the wall of my room. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I tell a lot of like prospective or aspiring YouTubers that you really need to invest in yourself
Mm.
to be successful. And like that can mean a lot of things. It's an investment of time, it's an investment of effort, and it is an investment in like gear and equipment to make your stuff look and sound as good as possible. And so I think what you see today on my channel has been the end result of 11 years of continuous trial and error
Mm.
in terms of how I frame my shots, how I light them, the microphones I use, and everything in between.
Mm. You talked about as well, and I'm going to go back to our last conversation, even though I cringe when I watch it back, as I told you off camera. You told me during that conversation that you would be happy because I think you were around, if the conversation was 3 years ago, it would have been around 7, 8 years into YouTube by that point.
3 years ago. So yeah, I was 8.
So it was 8 years into YouTube. You told me that you would have been happy if you got to 10 years and wrapped up within 10 years. So what changed when you hit 10 years and gave you, for lack of a better word, the desire to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if it was a case of like I wanted to be done in 10, but I was just kind of like, if I can make it to 10, then I would be just very pleased with myself
Yeah, that's
because
more what I meant.
it's a nice even number and it's, also, the 10-year anniversary of my channel fell around the same time as my 20-year high school reunion. So it's like selfishly, I was like, okay, if I got to keep this going until this point so I can have something to talk about with my
Mm,
former classmates. And like once, but now that I've done that, I had my 20-year reunion. And I'm like, now what? That's
mm,
like, what's my next end goal? So wait for the 30 year, I guess. But no, it's I don't know. What keeps me going is just knowing that I have so many ideas left,
mm,
and there's a lot left to discuss. And the great thing about professional wrestling is that even if I like never cover modern stuff again, there is
mm,
still this near infinite well of stuff that has happened before this moment that I can go back and look up. And not just from WWE, but from like so many other sources because wrestling is just such a vast tapestry.
mm,
And so, I mean, what keeps me going? It's just the fact that like this is my career, it's my livelihood, it's what provides for my family. And so I balance that responsibility with the joy that I get from creating content and writing jokes
Yeah.
and, just trying to be an entertainer. Because man, there's something that like I was having a conversation with a friend a while ago, and they said something to the effect of like, when you were a kid and like when you were in your classroom and they asked, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? A lot of kids my age, when they were younger, they said, oh, I want to be an actor. I want to go be an actor, this and that. And now a lot of kids that are that age today, they're all saying, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a Twitch streamer
Yeah.
because the goals have changed. But it's essentially the same thing. You're still being an entertainer, you're still being on camera. It's just a different platform now because technology has changed so much. I call YouTube low risk Hollywood
Mm.
because you don't have to uproot and move to Los Angeles to be famous on YouTube. If you're lucky, you can be from anywhere and get famous. And so I think that's really cool about the technology today. But as far as like what keeps me going beyond the 10-year mark, I guess now it's just kind of like I want to just prove to myself that I can keep going and continue to put out quality content and continue to be like this pillar in the YouTube wrestling community.
What was the moment before we go into why you don't cover modern wrestling and things like that? What was the moment that you felt like one of the pillars of modern wrestling YouTube?
When I hit 100,000 subscribers, that was the moment where I thought, oh, this is something serious now. Um, because I know that before that, the channel kind of blew up a bit because like, oh, I did the Jim Cornette video and I just put out my top 8 worst heel turns video. And like those were both kind of like um, big videos for me that year. And this was 2015 when this all happened. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think that was kind of the moment where I knew like when I hit the 100,000 mark, and also shortly after that, I was in Dallas for WrestleMania 32 weekend, and I was at WrestleCon, and I had a table and everything. And the number of people who like came up to me and were like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you." Some people will tell me like, "Oh, I came to like this con or this show or whatever because I knew you were going to be there. I want to meet
Oh
you." I'm like,
wow.
"Dude, Sabu is right next to me. He's at my table, and like you're marking out over me over Sabu." And like I think that was kind of a wake up call for me, was seeing that, oh, like these videos really do have an impact on people, and they are, to a degree, they are popular. So that was quite the feeling for me. And then like a year after that, in 2016, was when I went full time with it. So I was working a day job for the first like two and a half,
Mm.
3 years of my channel. And then it got to this point where it's like, well, I have to either, shit or get off the pot, as they say, and I have
Yeah.
to make this leap. And I made this leap into full time YouTubing around the same time my wife and I were expecting our second child, and
That's
we were in the
brave.
process and we were in the process of a move. So clearly I had it all figured out. But it was definitely a thing where like, yeah, now that I'm
Mm.
doing full time, like it's serious and like I
Mm.
have to treat it as such.
Well, you talked about there doing full time in 2016. So how did, and I hate bringing this up to creators, but how did the adpocalypse of 2017 affect your channel, do you think?
That was the weirdest timing too. It was less than like a year after I went full time and the apocalypse happened. Um, it sucked. It was a bit rough because revenue did go down,
Mm.
but I always kind of knew deep down that, like, okay, if I just keep doing what I'm doing and I weather the storm, things will improve. And they did. And
Mm.
things were steadily climbing back up. And then I kind of, from a business standpoint, realized, oh, I can put ad breaks in the middle of my videos to try and
Oh
increase
yeah.
revenue. So like for a long time I always thought it was kind of like selling out in a way, or like cheap to put
Mm.
ad breaks in the middle of a video. And then I realized like, no, I'm a business. This is my income. And like I think as long as you're not excessive with it, with the ad breaks, I think it's fine. I think a lot of viewers can be forgiving of it. So I think that combination of like waiting it out and waiting for the content ID and the ad revenue thing to get sorted, and then also like starting to increase the number of ad breaks in my videos. I think that was just, that was an easy fix. And so the adpocalypse, it was a bit rough for sure, especially it was my first year full time and I was pretty nervous about my future, but it's been no looking back.
Did you have a moment during that tough time where you were like, I might have to speak to my wife, I might have to get another job in TV or something like that?
No, not really. Like I was briefly kind of perturbed by it, but I don't know if I ever felt that my stuff was going to be affected because, I think the adpocalypse taught me a very valuable lesson, and it's that anytime you hear about like sweeping changes to the YouTube algorithm, oh my God, this new law is going to be in effect, it's going to ruin it for everybody, this and that, like doesn't really do it. I mean, I remember when Kappa came out and everyone's like, oh my God, like every wrestling channel is going to be flagged because like it's wrestling's not kid friendly. And like what, nothing. I never heard of any YouTube channel ever getting a wrestling YouTube channel, especially ever getting struck down or copyright striked because of Kappa or whatever. There's obviously going to be fluctuations in viewership and like revenue just based on the time of year. And wrestling is very interesting to try and like capture the trends and the seasonal trends and everything. But like, no, it's like there have been moments where I've had doubt and like, oh my gosh, like, is this the end? But then it just kind of passes over and I'm fine. So
So you talked about earlier, but we went on a different tangent, but you talked about earlier not covering modern wrestling and things like that anymore. I know for a while you were doing Who Wore It Better for SmackDown and Raw, and you were doing This Is Really Bad, but I can't remember what the NXT show was called, and I really apologize for that.
it was Wednesday Warfare.
Wednesday Warfare, that's correct, where you were watching everything. So where did that shift happen that you were like, I'm just gonna do my one video a week, put all my time into that, and make them better.
Yeah, no, it was that there was definitely a shift because for the first couple of years of my channel, I was doing like one video a week.
Mm.
I didn't really cover the modern stuff. I was like vaguely aware of it. I mean, like I was kind of like not watching it as much then. And then I started doing like pay-per-view reviews, like the modern ones. Like once a month, I'm doing WWE pay-per-views. And then like it eventually just kind of grew. And like as the opportunity was there to build an audience and gain viewership, yeah, I was definitely into watching and reviewing all the weekly shows that I could.
Mm.
And yeah, it definitely reached a critical mass where it got to this point where it's like after several years of it, it got to this point where the effort and work that it took to watch the show, take notes on the show, film a review, edit the review, and then get it up in a timely fashion 2 to 3 times a week was on top of my regular workload, on top of being a husband and a father, was getting really difficult to maintain. I was losing sleep. I was losing quality time with my family. And to be quite honest, the videos after a while, like Raw and SmackDown reviews, NXT reviews and stuff, just weren't making enough money for me to be worth it. And so I made the decision. I'm going to trim the fat. I'm going to cut these videos and it will lighten my workload. I was a bit worried at first that, oh no, now my viewership's going to go down because like here's like, hey, they're not making me a ton of money, but they're getting me the X number of views a week. And now like I'm going to lose those. But strangely enough, when I started actually cutting those videos, the algorithm worked in my favor and it was addition by subtraction, where once you get rid of the lesser performing videos on your channel, typically the algorithm will then promote your better stuff better.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if you've got if you have videos that put out like 100,000 views in a week, but you're also putting out videos that put out like 2,000 a week, the 2,000 a week ones are going to drag you down, is what I
Mm.
learned. Like the algorithm will stop recommending your stuff as much because it's not successful and people aren't watching it. So if you dedicate your stuff, it's kind of a double-edged sword because that really means that YouTube punishes trying to experiment and be creative.
Yeah.
So it forces YouTubers into a bit of a box. But in my case, it really helped. Like it lightened my workload. I felt better. I've been able to get some sleep again on like Mondays and Wednesdays.
Mm.
And then yeah, just be able to and the channel continued to thrive as a result. So I still obviously cover modern pay-per-views when I can. I'm in the process of editing my Money in the Bank review finally. That's going to
This
be out.
probably will go up next month, so that will be up by now. I'm not
Okay,
gonna lie.
well then yes.
Just being
So yeah,
transparent.
thank you. So yeah, I mean, as we were recording this, my Money in the Bank review is going to come out a week and change after the show, but because like I had other conflicts and obligations, I couldn't really watch it until now. But like I'm glad that I've given myself the grace and the ability to wait on that sort of thing where it's like, hey, in a past life, Brian would have watched the pay-per-view in the middle of his vacation, filmed a review and tried to get that out while also trying to balance vacation. That 2024 Brian thinks that's ridiculous. And so
Mm.
like he can't do that anymore. So I'm glad that I'm able to like make that separation and I feel comfortable enough in the channel where I can do that, where I don't feel like, oh my God, I gotta put a video out like right now, or like I'm gonna falter. So doing it long enough and my channel having kind of been built up the length that it has been has kind of afforded me a bit of a cushion. I think that's a certain degree of comfort I don't want to give up.
So, Brian, it sounds like you were quite burned out doing the weekly reviews, and because of the effect it had on your channel, you stopped as well as being burned out. So now, what have you put in place to be like, I don't want to feel burned out anymore? How I'm going to do this to make it stop?
I'm one of those weirdos where it's like I will try and take things off my plate to make things easier for me, and then I will immediately refill that plate with different work.
Mm.
So I always find myself like the time gets sucked up by something else inevitably, but like my nights are free, and I think that's the most important thing to me. But yeah, burnout is a real threat, and I mean, I've definitely come close to like full on burnout in the past, and I find I've been coming up with ways to try to mitigate that over the years. Like I hired a writer. Over the years I've had a couple of different writers.
Mm.
I've got somebody who edits for me and helps the editing process. Um, hiring a team to help delegate some of that stuff and cutting back some of those videos and some of those obligations I put on myself really went a long way in continuing and preventing burnout. Also, one thing that I highly recommend for anyone aspiring wrestling content creators is to not have to like treat every show you watch like it's part of your job. Like, because I
Yeah.
was watching like Raw, SmackDown, NXT, AEW, and I had to have takes for all of them. And I tell you what, that was exhausting. And so like now, I kind of I think AE was like then it got to the point where like okay NXT or AEW was my recreational wrestling. Like, I don't have
Mm.
to think about it. I'm just gonna watch the Dynamites and this and that. And by having at least one bit of recreational wrestling in your life that you don't
Mm.
have to do a video on or make takes for, like I think that can really help you stay grounded and help remind you why you're a wrestling fan in the first place. Because if you treat everything about whether it's wrestling or whatever subject matter you cover, if you treat every aspect of it as something like work related and you don't have time to make it part of like a work life balance,
Yeah.
then it's going to consume you and it's going to make you miserable. Like, I think that I feel like I've had the takes beaten out of me. I don't want to give takes anymore because it's so frustrating to put it's like to put them out there in the wrestling sphere. I can have takes about old wrestling all day, but I feel that like today's wrestling discourse is so angry all the time and so
Yeah.
combative, and it's us versus them and it's this, it's that. And it's like I don't want to be part of that anymore. I just want to like I want to do what I love. I want to do what I have fun with, and I'll go where the wind takes me. Essentially, I don't um I'm not about that life. And so it's like I'll try and I still try and keep up with like the modern pay-per-views and stuff, but I try and just look at everything from a fan perspective, and just try and enjoy it, but also observe some of the technical bits and observe some of the nuts and bolts because of my perspective and my background.
Yeah.
That's a part that's hard to turn off. When you've been involved in wrestling for as long as I have, it's really hard to turn that off entirely when you're reviewing and critiquing. But I, I think by lessening my consumption of wrestling for work, especially, it just allows me to, enjoy it more when I watch it.
That's really, really cool. Obviously, you talked about there putting more stuff on your plate. You do commentary for Prestige Wrestling and some other places. So, how did your great commentary duo with the great man that is Jordan Castle come about and things like that?
Well, I mean, the commentary journey really began in 2019 when I started with Ring of Honor,
Mm,
because when I reached out to them, I did not really want to do, I didn't really think about being like a broadcaster, didn't really think about doing interviewing or commentary. I sent my manager reel in honesty, and then they said, "Well, we don't really have room for a manager, but we like you because we like you on the channel that you have. So, like, would you be interested in doing like this thing? Would you be interested in hosting a top five for our TV? Would you be interested in doing some commentary here and there?" I was like, "Sure, like I'll do anything, to get on Ring
yeah,
of Honor. Like, why would I turn that down?" So I got to do some really cool things, expanding my horizons in a broadcast capacity in ROH. And now I don't want to do anything else. Like, managing is fun. Getting to be ringside and be a baddie it can be fun in its own way. But now that I have gained this experience broadcasting on such a big level, it's like that's what I want to do now. And so I'm definitely doing what I can to kind of get my reps in, doing commentary both for PAL Pro Wrestling, which is based here in Eugene, where I am, and also Prestige, like you said,
yeah,
working alongside Jordan Castle. That's been a real treat. I've been doing commentary with them regularly for the last couple of years now, and Prestige is truly one of the fastest rising, most notable indies on the West Coast right now with the stuff they're putting out and the shows they're putting on. The Roseland events, we just did Combat Clash PDX this a week the previous weekend before we were filming this interview.
yeah,
That was in Portland, Oregon, in Viking Pavilion. It was really cool because my mom actually worked at Portland State University for a bit when I was growing up. So to be able to do a show like on the same campus that she worked was pretty neat. I and like that was just a great show. Like 1,200 people were there, and we were calling some amazing matches. Jordan Castle, I'll say this, I told him this. I hate how good he is for how young he is.
yeah.
He's only 22 or 23 years old, and he can just run commentary circles around some people, and it's fun trying to keep up with him. It's keeps me sharp, but it's been great working with him. It's been great just kind of like learning about my style as I go and as I grow as a commentator. And yeah, it's something I really like doing, and I want to try as much as I enjoy YouTubing and doing my
Mm.
channel. I'm really enjoying this new chapter in my career as a broadcaster.
Does that help with enjoying another aspect of wrestling? Does that help sort of maintain your fandom in the sense of you're not just talking about wrestling, you're involved in wrestling events, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, I think um, working in wrestling in a couple of different territories in the last 20 years, um, and also doing my own channel and observing a lot of different wrestling through that,
Mm.
uh, it's really helped broaden my horizons as to what I like in professional wrestling. I think that if you watch some of my earliest work with Wrestling with Regret, I think you could see that I have a very narrow view of what wrestling is compared to what I do now. And that comes from exposure to a lot of the things my colleagues were doing, a lot of what I'm seeing out in the greater wrestling sphere, and just getting older and getting, I guess it's kind of a weird thing. I think wrestling is one of those things where I'm actually getting less set in my ways as I get older with it, where I'm finding myself more open and more accepting to a lot of different things that some of the older talking heads in wrestling might crap on.
Yeah.
I'm here for the ride. I'm growing along with the business. Is kind of how I see it, because I'm not just an outsider looking in. Like, I'm in it. I'm in it all these different levels, and I'm seeing what's going on and how the business is progressing. And I think that's been a great experience for me. So yeah, it's been great to
to be a part of that and to grow. It makes me feel more versatile. I think being versatile is key in professional wrestling. Like if you want to get in that business, you want to learn as much as you can and you want to learn how to do as many different jobs as you can. Technically, I know how to wrestle in that I was trained, but like, okay, that's
Mm.
a job. I can broadcast, I can do post production, I can film, I can do a lot of different things. And so I think that's just something I learned throughout my time in wrestling is that the more things you learn to do, um, the
The more
more
useful you
desirable
are.
you exactly the more useful you are, the more desirable you are in the business. And I think a lot of that is starting to pay off for me.
That's really, really cool. You brought up old talking heads there, and I've got to ask this question as a fan. What happened between you and Jim Cornette 4 years ago?
Um, okay. It started out that I was making this tweet, kind of broad strokes sort of thing, just about like comparing wrestling to the circus. That is
Mm.
not a controversial comparison because it literally
No.
began in the circus. And so, and I was kind of making a stand about comedy wrestling as we know it. And I said something in the tweet saying, let people enjoy the clown's old man. And it wasn't directed at anybody specific because there's a lot of old men who, don't like the things that I was kind of rallying in support of. And then, as is wont to happen, people will go like at Jim Cornette
Snitch
thoughts,
tagging, I believe, was the term that you
yeah,
used.
that's dead ass what it was. It was snitch tagging. And Cornette, who I'd always kind of enjoyed, and everything and respected, it's like, oh, that's an interesting take. Nice knowing you. Like, well, fuck you. Like, what is that about? And so I was a little upset about that. It was like, I thought I thought it was very silly for him to like, you know, do something like that because I made this very innocuous take on something, and so yeah, I was a bit rankled by that, and yeah, I made a video about it, and there's people out there who are still, bitching today. Oh yeah, you did this because Cornette blocked him. It's like it's more than just the block, It's just like that's your hill to die on, and that's what you're gonna like block somebody on Twitter for when it wasn't even directed at you. And I was a bit angry about that, and I spoke my mind, and it is what it is. Do I feel that way now? Still, like I still believe in comedy wrestling. I still believe funny can equal money,
Mm.
so I'm not going to change my stance on that. Um, do I think I could have gone about it a bit differently? Sure. Like I don't harbor any ill will toward Cornette or Bischoff or Dutch Mantel or any of these other like old talking heads who just want to bitch about how modern wrestling is this and that. Like it's not my business anymore, and they can go on and say what they want. I'll say what I want, and we can just leave it at that. I don't really want to I don't consider myself like angry at Cornette. I don't have any beef with Cornette. It's been a while. I don't care anymore. So I'll just leave it at that.
I just had to ask that question as a fan, and I do apologize, my friend.
Yeah, it's all right. That's what happens, People get upset in wrestling. Tempers flare, egos can be damaged and stuff, and pride can be hurt. And I've certainly felt all those things and then some. And then once you walk away from that, you take a step back and look at the bigger picture. It's like so much of it is that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of
Mm.
things. And so that's kind of how I live life now. I really don't have takes about anything because it's just the point where it's like, at the end of the day, does it really matter? It's like it's wrestling. You like what you like, and you don't be a dick. That's kind of like I have to keep going back to that because it's literally like, um, you know, the only thing that matters in wrestling as a fan, the only thing that should matter is whether or not you like something.
Yeah.
And all the talk about ratings and all the talk about attendance and demos and this and that shouldn't make a lick of difference to you unless you work for that company.
Mm.
Everything else is superfluous. It all boils down to whether or not you enjoy something. And, you can have takes on it, you can have opinions on it and stuff, but, to make that correlation and say, oh well, because of this that means like this company's dying or whatever, it just seems so silly Like I think it's okay to not like things in wrestling, but when I see people like, openly saying the sky's falling,
Disparaging. Yeah.
disparaging, the sky's falling, doom and gloom, pack it up in the mud, whatever. It's like it's so dumb because like all these people who say these things, like it's their opinion doesn't matter to me because
Mm.
I know what I like. I'm comfortable in what I like in my wrestling. And I'm now almost 40 years old. I don't care about like, people trying to tell me what, oh, you should feel bad that you like this thing. I'm gonna
Mm.
like what I like. And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna make a big fuss and try and defend my stance anymore, but I'm also not gonna like, I
Take it
will
lying down, for lack of a better word.
it just is what it is. I believe in what I believe in, and I'm trying now just to like let it go and just say, here's my thought. It's out in the ether. You can take that information and do with it what you will. But I'm not going to try and debate people on this stuff anymore. It's not worth my time.
I understand what you're saying completely there. Before we do my traditional wrap-up questions, I have a bit of a self-indulgent question, Brian. You came on the
Mhm.
channel 3 years ago when I was first starting. Have I improved? What did you enjoy? Everything in between.
I don't know. I mean, I would say that from the last interview to this one, let's see here. My set has improved.
Yeah.
We moved to a different house since then. Um, yeah, I'd say your questioning has been great. I can definitely tell you've improved your interviewing style since you started 3 years ago. So, I think that's the coolest thing. If you can look back and see that you've grown and changed, then I think that's the biggest indicator I think of success is just being able to, evolve. You can't stay in one you can't stay in one style. You always have to evolve just a little bit. That's why like the wrestling with regret in 2024 is like very different than the wrestling with regret in 2013. It's because this constant growth and evolution.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying completely there. You talked about what you view as a success a little bit there. But as we look at wrapping this up, Brian, first of all, do you view your channel as a success? And second of all, if you did step away tomorrow, what would you want your legacy as a creator to be?
Those are good questions. Very good questions. Yeah, I mean, I can say objectively that my channel has been a success, and I can say that because, like I said, it's been my full-time job. It's been the way I provide for my family for about 8 years now,
Mm.
and it blew up in a way I never would have expected. And so, yeah, I'm very happy with the success of this channel. And I don't think it's going to end tomorrow. But if it did end tomorrow, and if I just stopped entirely, as far as my legacy, this is something that I hear a lot from fans, and it blows me away every time. One of the most common like compliments I get about my channel is saying, "Oh, your channel got me into wrestling. Like I
Mm.
found it by accident, and I went down this rabbit hole, and I became a big fan." Or people will tell me, "I was a wrestling fan. I effed off from it for a while, didn't care, and then I stumbled upon your videos, and then that got me back into it." And that's something I never really anticipated to be
Mm.
like the catalyst for fandom. But I hear that so often now, and it really still blows me away every time because it was never intended to be that. It was just like, here I am doing my best nostalgia critic, my best angry video
Yeah.
game nerd, but I'm putting a wrestling spin on it. And kind of like a video version of WrestleCraft.com, which is one of my biggest influences as a fan, like in college and everything. So like I started out doing that, and it was just like, here's something for to pop me and my wrestling friends, and now it's become kind of this like encyclopedia in a way. It's become this like
Yeah.
database, this research database, and it's been really cool. Like, yeah, hear people tell me that like they got them into wrestling or got them back into wrestling. It's still very weird to hear people say, "I grew up watching you." I'm like, stop
Oh,
making me
yeah.
feel
Yeah.
old. Stop doing that. um, but yeah, I think that's going to be I think I could look back and say that's going to be my biggest legacy is that more than any joke I did or any review I did in particular or interview that I conducted, the fact that Wrestling with Regret has gotten people like into wrestling or got them back into wrestling, I think that's my biggest legacy, and I'm pretty proud of that.
That's really, really cool, Brian. As we wrap this up, we are going to do a segment that is a staple on this channel called Generic Wrestling Questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before, no, that's why I'll ask Brian his favorite match, favorite pay-per-view card, favorite wrestler's entrance team, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, the questions I assume Brian might be asked on social media or in his YouTube comments. So now he'll have a place to be like, go watch Tom. I've answered this sort of thing. So
Yeah,
what's your
it's
favorite
all
match
narrowed
of all
down right
time?
here. Ooh, favorite match of all time, man. Straight wrestling match, I would say Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar at Mania 19. That's like one of
Mm-hmm.
my faves. I was there for that live, and that was pretty spectacular. I think like recently, my favorite match of all time, the one that really blew me away, and I would talk about it for months afterward, was the first Stadium Stampede match
Oh wow.
because yeah, it was just a great way to like work around pandemic stuff. I think the pandemic, as shitty as it was for all of us, it definitely made wrestling companies get creative and have to think
Yeah.
outside of the box and how to tell stories and how to have matches. So the Stadium Stampede, I think, was like one of the biggest things to come from that. So yeah, those are probably my two favorite matches off the top of my head.
Question regarding the Brock Lesnar match. What is your thoughts on the shooting star press?
I wish he hit it. I wish it connected because I remember being aware that Brock could do a shooting star press. And then like after he hit that second F5, and then like I could tell he was even before he looked to the corner, I knew, oh man, I wonder if he's gonna do shooting star press. And then he was gonna do it. And so it's like, had he connected the shooting star press, I think we'd all have a very different opinion about it would be a very different story about it. But the fact they were able to keep going and go on with the planned finish of Brock winning and Brock not dying, I think was adds to the legend of that matchup for me.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view card?
Oh man, that is so
You can
hard.
say one you worked on, by the way.
Well, I will say, as far as recent cards, go check out Combat Clash PDX on Prestige Wrestling's YouTube channel because that's a pretty damn solid card. Because that one's got the Motor City Machine Guns imploding. It's Alex Shelley versus Chris Sabin. There was Roderick Strong versus Timothy Thatcher. You had Athena wrestling Masha Slamovich in a surgical boot and was still able to wrestle.
Oh wow.
Um, you had this great 6-man all-star scramble match with some of like the brightest up and coming independent talent. We had Drexel and Danhausen. And the main event was pretty epic too. Alan Angels versus Evil Uno for the Prestige title, and many more matches. So for modern cards, check that one out. As far as like my other favorite like all-time cards, I go back to Mania 19. That's a really fun show. Mania 17 is a very fun one as well. I think All In 2000 or All Out 2021 was another great example of a great card overall. Yeah, man, it's really hard for me to think of any more beyond that. But those are some of the ones that I think of when I think of like what's a great complete wrestling show from top to bottom. Not a whole lot of like weak spots.
That's really, really cool. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance team?
Oh, Gangrel, easily.
Ooh,
Gangrel, the Brood theme, the Ring of Fire, that that captivated me in '98 when I first saw that. And it's kind of been my favorite. That and like Dan Severn's theme, I think, is probably my favorite like theme song just by itself. But in terms of his overall entrance and aura, it's gotta be Ganger.
that's really, really cool. What about your favorite tag team?
Edge and Christian, like specifically 2000 Edge and Christian, like when they became the multiple time tag team champions, totally reeking of awesomeness, 5 second pose. That team was like everything for me as like a young kid who liked stupid stuff, stupid comedy. They had the stupid comedy down, but they could also wrestle and still be really good characters and have great matches. So like those guys and like Kurt Angle, I think were like the best trio for me in 2000 because they hit all the boxes for me.
That's really, really cool. Before we do your favorite wrestler, I have a question. Do Edge and Christian reunite in AEW before they both retire? And who would you like their final match to be against?
I would love to see Cope and Christian Cage have like a one match as a tag team. I don't know if we'll ever get that. I don't know if they're going to leave that one alone. But if they do come back, gosh, like who would you have them wrestle? That's a tough one. I mean, I would love to see them. go against the Young Bucks, see how they would do with that, or maybe the Lucha Brothers. Yeah, I think there's some other tag teams that are escaping me at the moment as far as like what I think a dream contest would be. But one thing at a time. If we do see them reunite, that'd be pretty cool. But I don't know if they're gonna ever do the 5 second pose again. But it was definitely 2000s a magical time for sure.
That's really, really cool, Brian. And then finally, the biggest generic question, in my opinion: who is your favorite overall wrestler?
Man, are we talking all time or current? Because like I got a couple.
Can we have two, all time and current?
Okay, so two all time for me, probably Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. Honestly, two of my favorite, especially rookie Brock Lesnar. Man, that was so fun to watch. Brock he was unlike anything I ever saw before. And the way he kind of burst onto the scene was tremendous. Kurt Angle in a very different sort of sense, but very similar, skyrocketing to the top very early on, just being this total package of wrestling excellence and also sports entertainment excellence, being that kind of goofy character I loved so much. Those probably all time for me. I'd put Chris Jericho in an all time favorite as well, just for his overall body of work. As far as like current wrestlers, I like a lot. I think that Willow Nightingale is one of my favorite wrestlers currently. I've been a huge fan of hers since I started working with her in ROH. Danhausen's one of my all-time favorites. As far as current all-time favorites, that's a bit of a juxtaposition, but it's I love the Danhausen character. I was so cool to see that take off and become as popular as it is today. Orange Cassidy is a great one as well. I'm trying to think of other guys like Jacob Fatu is great. I'm so glad to see he's in WWE now, and I wish him the best of luck. Big fan of his. I like man, I'm trying to think of some other wrestlers I'm really enjoying right now. Yeah, I don't know. It's I see so many of them. It's hard to tell. But I will say that there's a lot of great up and comers I'm excited to see. Like Timothy Thatcher is one of my favorites as well. And that's kind of a sentimental favorite because he and I had the same rookie year and we actually kind of crossed paths in Portland when we were both coming up. Obviously, he's going to do much greater things in the ring than I ever could. But that's another guy I like to watch. And yeah, it's I generally like. Let me put it this way: I don't dislike anyone in wrestling. There's no one who I say, "Oh, I can't stand watching this person. I can't I hate this guy. Whatever, change the channel." I'm not like that. I am generally just kind of like a fan of everything, and I'm willing to, no matter what the story is, I'm generally able to kind of like just get myself in that mode and go along for the ride. So yeah, but as far as the ones that are the ones that make me stand up and pay attention, and the ones that I really like to follow, like Willow Nightingale, like I mentioned, Jaden, who is a wrestler here in Oregon. He's another up and comer. I think people should watch out for. Yeah, hard to pin down just one.
I understand what you're saying completely there. But as we wrap this up, Brian, obviously I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But the question I end this show on, I can't remember if we did this last time, is I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, even just people with social media, we're all sort of going to live forever in a very, very weird way if you think about the word. So what is one piece of content you're like, I would like to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please forget about it?
The one I asked that you all kind of collectively forget about is the one that I did about hijacking crowds, like some op-ed I did
Was this
very early in the
after
channel.
oh no, it wasn't after the Chris Jericho, Jim Cornette thing when they went back on the road then?
I don't think it was that. No, it was something else. It was just about like, the beach ball stuff, but it was, yeah, forget that one. As far as like a video I want everybody to remember me for, I'd hope it's Heroes of Wrestling. I'd hope it's maybe some of the stuff like the women's extreme wrestling. I'm actually working on a video right now that may drop before this interview does that I'm
very sorry
looking
about
for.
that.
I know, but it's fine. But I'm looking forward to the release of this upcoming video with very great interest because for you viewers watching this, if you like my videos about like one and done crap feds, like what the hell is this show? How did this get made? Then you are going to really enjoy the video that I have coming out at the end of July because it's so funny to see people go, I've never heard of this. And I love to inform and educate people on this weird stuff. So yeah, I think people should definitely be excited for when I talk about this particular video.
That's really, really cool, Brian. Obviously, I want to say thank you for a great conversation. If I'm being totally honest, I think this is my favorite one I've done this year. So
Oh, well, it's very nice. Appreciate that.
I really appreciate your time, good sir. So if you guys like this, make sure you like. Oh, I should promote you first. I do apologize, my friend. Where can the good people find you, your work, etc.?
Yeah, if you want to find me on X/Twitter, it's at Z-Man Brian Zane. I'm on Instagram at Brian Zane. I've got a Cameo if you want some personalized shout outs. I got Pro Wrestling Tees store. You can support Chris Hero if you want, but my Pro Wrestling Tees site is prowrestlingtees.com/wrestling with regret. And you can find me doing commentary every week on PAL Pro Wrestling on our YouTube page. You can hear me do commentary for Prestige Wrestling as well. And I'm also at DOA Pro Wrestling as the influencer, the ringside, scallywag for some of those shows. So you can check those out as well. But that's just a small sample of where you can find me. But Tom, thank you so much for having me once again on your show. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, good sir. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It's Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or at Tom Talks Rubbish. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.